Hi, this is Phil Frei, Director of Business and Finance, giving the school board a report on the budget forecasting and planning. Typically happens this time of year. With the referendum, there's a little bit more information, but we'll work that through. So first off, budget forecasting, just knowing that it's built on assumptions. I'll go through those. It's not exact science at all. When you're budgeting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, there's definitely a lot of assumptions involved. So start off, why do we do budget forecasting? Again, we've done this in Sunbury for, well, many, many years that I've been here. It's to be proactive, to know what's happening with our budget future for Sunbury Area School District, kind of know what's the budget look like for the next few years. And then also to make sure that we have resources available to meet the needs of the school board's expectations, as outlined in SRs, OEs, and ORs. So how do I do this? So same thing. I've used the Robert W. budget forecast model for many, many years. I've used that again for this year. What it does is looks at our past spending for the school district and projects future spending. And then it also kind of does the same on the revenue side. It looks at revenue from the state to project future revenue, and then also looking at enrollments because, as you know, enrollments drive our budget and all school districts' budgets. So a note on projections, just that, and I know on tonight you're also going to hear about enrollment projections and the same thing there. They're projections, and anytime, especially you get out long range projections like budget projections, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it is a projection, and things are very hard to predict what's going to happen in the state with finances, with the federal government, definitely with finances, what's going on now, and then just world, what's going to happen to the world and pandemics and things like that. So there's a lot of things that we don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 years. So we use our best estimates, our best assumptions to build the model that you see in front of you tonight. So one of those big key assumptions is enrollment. Tonight, by this time, you probably heard from University of Wisconsin, APL. Their baseline model for us has the district declining in enrollment over the next 5 years by 208 students. Specifically for 1 year out, it has the district going down 8 students. Then as a kind of a corollary note, since the third Friday in September, we've gained 22 students. But as you've heard Brad and I say many times, our enrollment in Sun Prairie is very volatile, kind of goes up and down. So we've gone up 22 students since the third Friday count. Senior Leaders Budget Team recommends using the enrollment projections based on based by University of Wisconsin APL. It's been the baseline model has been the most accurate over the last years. It's also pretty conservative, so hopefully, if we do see some student growth, that would be good. But at this point, we're going to use the baseline model. Other key assumptions. So we did have that successful referendum in 2024. We will be rolling in $2 million worth of spending for that. That's part of the referendum planning. Part of that referendum planning was also to balance the budget, and that is part of that referendum planning. We do anticipate, or I guess assume the state will give us $325 more per student. That's what we received the last 2 years. But I'll say it now because I haven't said it yet. There's a lot. The state hasn't even released their budget for the next 2 years. Once they release it, there's a lot of work that happens. We will not know the state budget till midsummer at earliest. But with that said, we have to build a budget. So we're building it on $325 per pupil increase. Salary increase, which is a big share of our budget, as you know, a 3.75% salary increase in 25-26, which would include professional development for our groups, and then 3% salary increases in the following years. Health insurance would go up 10% in 25-26, which is still to be determined because we won't know those health rates for quite a few months. And then I'm using an 8% increase in health insurance for the following years. Overall inflation for 25-26 2.95% that's been locked in, and then 3% inflation for the years following. And then we also have to be strategic on how we budget. We have a Fund 46, which the board knows about. That's our long-term capital maintenance fund, and how we can maybe transfer some money into Fund 46 over the next 1 or 2 years, and then pull it out over the remaining years to balance budgets and things like that. But we'll get into more specifics about that in the future. I also want to keep this slide in here just to remind people our assumption is that we keep our class sizes the same as they've been. So that's the current class size numbers that we use, and unless we hear differently from the school board, we'll keep moving forward with that. So what does all those assumptions and many, many other assumptions, what does that give us in the budget forecast model? What does it show? So you can see the next 5 years. Again, it's a 5-year budget forecast model. Our revenues less expenses. So how this reads, so in 25, 26, our next fiscal year, which starts July 1st, if on paper right now, we'd have about a $511,000 surplus, which is really a small, very small percentage of our $135 million budget. So basically the end result is we're on budget. And you can see that for the next 4 years. We're on budget, which that makes sense with the referendum that we had. Yeah, and you can see those numbers. Now, when you go out to 29-30, remember our referendum ended in fiscal year 28-29. You can see there's a potential large deficit then. So over the next 3-4 years, the school board and administration will need to follow that and plan for that, and just know that that's out there. So again, next 4 years looks like we should be on budget. Again, on paper, there's a lot of budget work that has to be done. I talked to you about the assumptions that we're doing, but at this point, you can see where that the next 5 years show for Sun Prairie School District. So you might say, why is there no deficit? So remember, when we built the referendum for November 5th, 2024, we really engaged with budget forecasting, and part of the referendum was to avoid significant deficits from 25, 26 through 28, 29. So again, they were built with conservative assumptions. Hopefully, those assumptions hold true. And we definitely, every year you'll see a budget forecast model and see where we're at. But again, good news on this, that the referendum that the campaign that we had that for a referendum to reduce or eliminate deficits for the next 4 years, at this point is playing out. Another kind of the second part of this discussion is what is the initial use of that 2024 referendum funds. Remember, a big share of that money was to go to balance the budget. And you just saw in my presentation that we pretty much have a balanced budget on paper for the next 4 years. But part of that money also went for compensation and for TLE increases. So we're going to talk about that on the next few slides. So the first one is use. This would fall under the TLE bucket of basically $1 million for next year. They will use $100,000 to have DLI, to provide DLI transportation. So what that means is we're going to have DLI at Northside and Meadowview, and all 9 schools would be eligible for DLI. So if you're any of those 7 schools, not Meadowview or Northside, you would get, if you want it for DLI, get bused to Meadowview and Northside. So hopefully I said that straight. But to do that, right, busing costs money, and it's hard to get a real good number on this because we don't know how many kids are going to sign up and how much each shuttle is going to cost and stuff like that. So at this point, we're budgeting $100,000 for next year to provide transportation to get DLI students to Meadowview and Northside. The second use of that bucket of money, $400,000, is to expand our dual credits. So our students that go to Madison College STEM Academy, basically to double the enrollment for that. That cost is about $400,000. There is an offset because if 20, 30 students go to STEM, they aren't going to attend our high school, so then we do pull some FTE back from each high school because of that. We also want to make sure that we have students at East and West have equal access to classes. So we're going to add a couple shuttles to be going between the two schools. And you can see the rationale from that. And the estimated cost of that is $12,800. And then the last thing is this came up that last year we couldn't offer some classes because they had smaller enrollments, but we thought with some of the money, $160,000, that some of those smaller classes that we weren't offering last year because of small classes could be offered next year. So, and I should say for all four of these strands, Monday night TLE will be there and they can definitely explain it better and the rationale better than I can tonight. But again, for two additional staff members, one at each high school, the estimated cost of that's $160,000. Then, if you remember, the other bucket of the referendum was for staff compensation. So we're going to hold $1 million in reserves for unanticipated compensation or benefits adjustments during the 25-26 year. Why are we holding that in reserve? Is basically we don't know yet. As I said, we won't know our health insurance renewal rates for a while. We also know there's going to be a support staff and administrator wage study during this year and 25-26. So there could be compensation increases for that, but we don't know what the amounts are yet. And we have to also, as always, monitor the pay increases from other districts. So this $1 million at this point is to be determined. And again, that would come back to the board at some point when those dollar amounts are known. But $1 million would be at this point put in the budget for those, again, to be determined. So just to recap that, for provide educational programming, that overall bucket was for $4 million for that, and $672,800 would be used next year. Then $7 million was for strengthening compensation and benefits. Remember, we used $3 million last year to increase teacher pay. Then another $1 million, as I said, right now would be to be determined in next year's budget. And then that will more details on that will come forward over the next few months. So just wrapping this up, the overall budget impact from all those things I just talked about is that, again, we should have a balanced budget, and I want to emphasize that. And the second thing is we want to talk about the tax levy, projected tax levy and mill rate. Going back to 24-25, so the fiscal year that we're in right now, we have an $86.6 million tax levy. We did have a large tax levy increase of almost 13%. Our mill rate was $10.16. Next year, at this point, the projection is to have a $92.5 million tax levy. That increase in the tax levy would be quite a bit less than the year before at 6.8%. The mill rate would go up to 10.24 and a pretty small mill rate change of 0.8%, less than 1%. So the other thing we wanted to point out, that's how it's shaking out now. In the referendum materials, we said projected mill rate of $10.74 for next year. So we're happy to announce right now on paper, again, a lot of budget work has to be done, but on paper, that mill rate would be considerably lower than what we said during the referendum. We're also just focused on that tax levy increase too. So with that said, we'll be at the meeting Monday night, can explain more about this, explain more about the TLE and compensation bucket, so to speak. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me before Monday. That would be great, or at the meeting on Monday. Thank you.